Okay, so we are up to the fourth mission in the parak in the second chapter of Bava. It's a very exciting mission, Jack. We're up to.
Okay.
Very exciting. The Mishnah now is coming off the heels of the discussions that we've been having in the context of the Mishnah of the Mishnayos, which are really about different types of damages that the animal can do and whether or not it's expected or unexpected. And if it's expected, then you have to pay full damages. Unexpected, you pay half damages. And then if the animal acts in an aggressive manner, so that's something that's unexpected, generally speaking, right? A domesticated animal that acts in an aggressive manner is unexpected. So following that principle, you pay half damages unless it becomes expected. And that it means that it moves from being a short tom to be a normal animal into being a shor muad, an animal that has now been warned. It's been now over the course of time has gained the status of being an animal that it's expected to do damage due to its aggressive nature. So we had already discussed it. That was the very last Mishnah in the first chapter that really outlined those principles. Now, then the Mishnahs in the second chapter were giving us some details and further explanation to those basic principles. Now the Mishnah comes back to a general principle, and the general principle of so an animal can become a muad. For example, my dog or my ox, it goes and it attacks another animal, and so I bring it to Bezdin, and Bezdin warns me and the animal, you better watch this behavior. For now, you only have to pay half damages. Happens again, so then I have to pay half damages. It happens a third time. Okay, this is your last chance. Then on the fourth time, so now the animal officially becomes a muad. Every time it does this activity moving forward, I'd have to pay full damages because it should be expected at this point. But is there a redemption? Can the animal revert back to being docile, to being an animal that is not aggressive? That's the question that the Mishnah is dealing with right now, and how the basic assumption the Mishnah is making is yes, you can. The animal can learn a new behavior, and therefore it can revert back. The question is, how would we judge such a thing? How would we judge whether or not the animal is back to being a tom and is no longer a muad? Okay, that's what's discussed over here in the Mishnah. Yeah, Jack.
So it's an animal form of repentance.
That's right. That's right. Animal teshuvah. So the Mishnah says the following: Ezehu tam ve'ezehu muad. What is a animal which is acting like a tom, as it's acting in its normal manner? Ve'ezehu muad, in which animal is already expected for it to damage. Now, this question we already addressed. That's why I'm bringing it into the context over here of that. What we're really asking is, how do you go back once you're already in that state? Okay, so the Mishnah continues, and it says, muad, page 25, muad, that an animal, it's expected to do damage, kol she'idu bo shlosha yamim. If it did this aggressive behavior on 3 days, and the owner was warned on those 3 separate instances. Now, those 3 days do not need to be consecutive. It's important to note. Those 3 days could be 3 isolated times. But the reason the Mishnah is bringing up the fact that it's 3 days is that if it was all on the same day, we just assume the animal was having a bad day. Oh. Meaning that is not that we say, oh, see, it happened 3 times. No. That day was a rough day for the animal.
So since it uses the word sheha'idu, is related to testimony.
Yeah.
We have to go to a basin.
We're going to get to that. Yes, exactly right. We're going to discuss that whole process.
Basin only sits on Monday and Thursday.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, you could also go to a bezdin that was sitting all the time. It was just only in the small villages they got together on those days. Yeah. The tom. Now, how do you go back to being a tom animal? If on 3 separate instances where the animal was tested to be aggressive again, and it didn't do it.
Just like the Rambam.
Similar to the Rambam, yes.
Yeah.
Similar to the Rambam about
Or-
Teshuvah, yes.
Look at it backwards. The Rambam is similar to.
Right, yeah. So Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So what's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that if the animal is being presented with the same challenge as it was when it acted in the aggressive manner, and it doesn't do it, so then the animal is can go back to being into a tom state. Now, now what that means is like the let's say, for example, the Mefarshim explained that the ox, on 3 separate occasions, you took it out into a field with other oxen, right, to a grazing pasture or something like that, and when it got there, it just started goring any ox that got near it. It just started acting aggressively towards it, and then you bring it back, and on 3 separate occasions, 3 consecutive occasions, it doesn't act that way, even though there's animals coming over to it. So you know that whatever issue was going on with the animal has now been resolved, and the animal's back to its calm state. All right, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Reb Meir Omer. Reb Meir says, how does an animal revert back? Muad, shidu bo shlosha pa'amim. The Reb Meir says that a muad is an animal that was warned 3 times. It was warned 3 times. Now, that would mean even on the same day. That would mean even on the same day. It doesn't have to be 3 separate days. It can be even on the same day, according to Rameir. But Tom, now how does it revert back? Koshu atinokos mimisham mishin shemashmishin bo ve'eno nogeach. That you have kids playing with the animal and it does not gore the animal. And really, the Rambam in his commentary over here, he says that the children are like pulling on the animal, like it's like kind of like provoking the animal, and yet the animal doesn't do anything. We have a home video of Asher when he was probably about a year old, and remember the Eichner's dog, a big black dog. Remember that big black dog they had? It was like a horse, but he was like the most gentle animal in the world. So we have a video of Asher sitting on the floor next to this big like a small horse, and Mama's whacking him and pulling his tail and ripping his fur, and he's just lying there doing nothing in response. Yeah. So that's so what? He's a Tom. Yeah, that was a Tom dog. Yeah. But his name, I don't think his name was Tom. His name was Tom. Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Oh my God.
All right.
That's it. Okay. So this is the 2 opinions found in the Mishnah over here between Rabbi Yehuda and Meir.
Rabbi Meir's opinion isn't very practical. I mean, you're not going to.
Why?
How do you actually?
Yeah. How do you like? Oh, let's see if the animal has calmed down at all. Right. Let's put the baby there. Yeah. Let's test the animal. Yeah. I guess you have to wait for a circumstance to come up where that would be possible. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get to the 2 opinions shortly.
All right.
For now, I want to go to the first part of the Mishnah where it talks about how the animal becomes a muad in the first place. This Charlie was hinting to before. I photocopied for us the Rambam that goes through all the details of how an animal becomes a muad, and this creates practical implications for Bezdin today, because basically the Gemara in Bava Kama tells us in Bava Kama daf Pei Daled, the Gemara tells us that ein tam b'chutz la'aretz. There's no such thing as a short tam in chutz la'aretz. Bezdin is not able to sit on cases about whether or not about whether or not an animal is considered a tam or a muad. And the Rambam over here is addressing why that is the case, why Bezdin cannot do that. Okay, and when we get to that part of the Rambam, outside of Eretz Yisrael, or when I say outside of Eretz Yisrael, I mean outside the realm of being what's called a dayan samuch, having proper smicha. So we'll talk all about that in just a moment. Let's go through. That's just the context of what the Rambam is talking about here, and when we get there, we'll explain what that means. So the Rambam writes the following. This is how Bezdin deals with it. Behema she'ezika es adam, that if an animal damages a person, ein go v'nisko dayan echutz la'aretz. Dayanim outside of Eretz Yisrael are not allowed to judge these cases because it's not common. The Gemara establishes the following rule that really for all of Dine Mamros, all cases related to civil law, you need, the Gemara tells in the beginning of Sanhedrin that you need smuchim, you need judges who have proper smicha that comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. The original smicha came from Moshe Rabbeinu that was given to Yoshua. That smicha had continued on. There was a tradition that continued on. The Gemara, towards the end of the first chapter of Sanhedrin, talks about those dayanim that were able, those rabbanim that actually got smicha, those that didn't. But at a certain point, smicha stopped. That the tradition of passing on from one to the next no longer existed. In fact, the Gemara actually describes it as mamish like smicha. They used to. That's where it comes from. They used to lean on the dayan in order to demonstratize that the ability of Torah, of judging these cases, is now on to you. Today, what we refer to as smicha is really a degree. Hopefully, it's a good degree, but it's a degree. It is not. It's not an official capacity like that which is needed to judge Torah law. Due to the fact that we don't have real smicha today, so there's a number of practical implications. One is that punishments cannot be given out by a bezdin today. In order to give out punishments in bezdin, like Malkus, for example, you need a proper bezdin of smuchim. You're not able to give out punishments today. That was one of the impetuses to bring smicha back. That in the days of Rabbi Yosef Paro in the 16th century in Sfat, there was a whole campaign to reestablish smicha because the Gemara tells us that anyone that's chayav kares, that they are not going to have a full teshuvah unless they get malchus. So people wanted to have a full teshuvah. So in order to do that, you need to have a bezdin of proper smuchim. So there is a way to reestablish smicha. It's not for our discussion right now. When we get to Masechet Sanhedrin, we'll talk about that. But what is relevant to us is the fact that we don't have real smicha today. Because of the fact that we don't have real smicha, that limits us. Because how are you able to judge any of these cases? All civil law is going to go out the window. How are you going to judge any of these cases today? So the Gemara tells us in Masechet Bava Kama on the Pei Dalet and Masechet Gittin and Masechet Sanhedrin that there is a concept called shlichu sayu. Shlichu sayu dikamaya avdinan. That the dayanim of today are working based off of agency. They were given a proxy from the dayanim of old, through those that actually have proper smicha. They gave them rishus. They gave them the ability. They said, you know what? You will have the ability to judge certain cases. Now, what did they give them shlichus for, and what did they not? What did they give them the right to judge on and not? So the Gemara says that it needs to fit two qualifications. It needs to be something that is a chesron kiss. It needs to be something that has a monetary loss, as opposed to a penalty payment. So, for example, dayanim today are able to judge cases of theft, but we know that part of the payment related to theft is that if the thief is caught and he hadn't admitted to it, so then he has to not only pay back the principal, but he needs to pay a penalty payment. He needs to pay kefil, depending potentially on what he stole. He has to pay maybe sometimes 4 or 5 times the amount that he stole. There's a penalty payment involved. That penalty payment goes out the window. You never are, because the dayam today only have the right to judge on cases that are chesron kis, of monetary loss, but not of penalty payments.
Does it have anything to do with the temple not being there?
Well, that is part of how smicha was established.
Yeah.
Smicha will be reestablished once Mashiach
Yeah.
comes. The second qualification of knowing whether or not there is a case Bezdin can judge on today is number one, chesron kis, and number two is it needs to be matsui. It needs to be something that's a common situation, something that happens commonly. For example, the Gemara says that something that is uncommon is two Jews getting into a fist fight. Getting into a physical altercation is something that is uncommon, and therefore those types of situations, Bezdin today would not be able to judge on those disputes. They wouldn't be able to judge on the monetary cases related to a fisticuffs that takes place between two Jews. That is, those are cases that Bezdin does not have the right to touch because number one, it's einu matsui, it's not common. And number two, it's cases of chesron kis. Now, the Rambam just said that a behemoth shezikas ha'adam, an animal that damages a person, ein govin nisko dainechotz arts. You're not allowed to. The Bezdin of today will not be able to judge those cases because it's a davar she'eino matzui. It's something that's uncommon. Aval adam shehizik behemas chavero. However, a person damaging the animal of their friend, mishalim nezek shalim, would have to pay full damages b'chol makom, in every place. Kemi shekarka, kemi shekara ksusaso o shovar kelav o katzas nitioso. Scenarios of people damaging each other's property. It happens all the time. Those are cases that Bezdin would be able to judge on. V'chein, so too the Rambam says, another case that Bezdin would be able to judge on today, behema shehazika b'shein. You have an animal that damaged through the means of shein. What was shein? That the animal, it does something for its own benefit, right? That's something that's very common. And regel, the Rambam says on the next column, on the regel, and cases of the animal trampling, right? Those are things that happen all the time. The animal walks and is doing its own thing and it causes damage. Since these are scenarios that it's expected for the damage to happen, from the animal's inception, it's something that's common, and therefore judges, even if they don't have smicha, would be able to judge on these cases. Okay, good. Bein shezika behema acheretz kigon shenischach ba o achla perish dark la'ochlon kiyotze bezeh. Bein shezika ochlon bekelim she chayavus len nezek shalom hakol govin dainechutz laaretz. Okay, aval. Now this is important. Line number 6 on column 2. Aval im haisa tama. However, what about cases of the animal acting in an aggressive manner? What if the animal is a tam, it's a calm animal, vo'ida, ve'zika, and it was warned, and it does damage, kagon, she nashcha, it aggressively bit somebody, nagfa, it attacked somebody, ravtza, bata, it pushed, it kicked, nagcha, it gored, ein goven hanezik hazeh hashalim dainechutz la'aretz. Dayanim that don't have smicha outside of Eretz Yisrael are not able to judge these cases. She'ein muad b'chutz la'aretz. There's no such thing as creating a muad in chutz la'aretz. V'afilu huad ba'aretz. Even if the animal, let's say, was warned by a bezdin in Israel of proper smuchim, people that have smicha, v'yatzel l'chutz la'aretz, and then it escaped to go to outside of Eretz Yisrael, v'hizik, and it does damage there, ein govin isko, and they go to the local bezdin outside of Israel, you're not able to judge that case because that's uncommon. Halacha Yud Beis, line number 10.
How does he know this?
Oh, this is like almost word for word the Gemara in Bava Kama on Daf Pei Dalet. Yeah, everything in the Rambam has a source, straight from the Gemara. Yeah,
It seemed like it was.
it's almost word for word the Gemara on Daf Pei Dalet. Umipnei ma, line number 10 in the middle. Halacha Yud Beis. Umipnei ma ein muad b'chutz la'aretz. Why is there no such thing as a muad, as an animal becoming a muad in chutz la'aretz, meaning with dayanim that don't have proper smicha? So this is where it becomes very relevant to us, because the Rambam describes how an animal becomes a muad. Lefi, because shetzarich lahayid bo b'pnei bezdin. In order for the animal to become a muad, it needs to be warned in front of bezdin. Ve'ein sham bezdin. What's the definition of a bezdin? It means you have a group of 3 dayanim that have smicha sitting in Eretz Yisrael. If you don't have that, so then you are unable to give a proper warning in order for the animal to be a muad, right? So the animal was a tom. And then it comes and it does damage. In order for that damage to register in Bezdin as its first strike, you need to go to a Bezdin of Smuchim in Eretz Yisrael. If that doesn't exist, so then it's impossible for that to register as being muad. Lefikach, therefore, im hayu Bezdin b'chutz la'aretz, if they go to a Bezdin outside of Eretz Yisrael, kashem shehein danim dinei knasos b'chutz la'aretz, kach me'idim es be'ema b'fneim b'chutz la'aretz. All right, well, let's not focus on that right now. But then the Rambam, based off of what the Rambam's saying, what would come out? What would that mean? So let's say the animal gores in La Jolla, okay? So you go to the local Bezdin and you want to judge the case. You want to deal with the damage that's taking place over there. Now, Bezdin's not going to be able to touch that case. Why?
They don't have smicha.
So they're not a smicha. Okay, fine. But I thought before we said that an animal that causes damage, they can judge on. Why specifically the case of Karen can they not? Because when it happens the first time, what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to give a warning. Now, they're not able to give that warning, right? Because in order for them to give the warning, they need to be dayanim that have smicha. Now, why can't they say, all right, at least he should pay the half damage, right? The first time it happened, you pay it. The second time and the third time, you pay half damages, right? Why can't they do that?
Because that's a fine and not a.
Exactly.
And they're not.
Remember, what were the 2 qualifications we said in order for dayanim to judge a case? It needs to be something that's common, and it needs to be monetary loss as opposed to a fine. If it's a fine, they can't. Remember, we had a machlokas, and this is going back now. We had a machlokas about when the machlokas was about whether or not paying half damages for a tom, is that considered a knas, chatzin as a knas, or mamon, or is that considered payment? Remember, we said that the fact that the animal acted aggressively was totally unexpected, that you don't have to pay full damages. Is that because in theory you don't have to pay anything and we're just going to penalize you because you should have been watching your animal? Or do we say no, in reality you would have had to pay the whole thing, but because of the fact that this is something that was unexpected, we're going to drop it down to only having to pay half, because Hashem has a concern for the finances of Klal Yisrael. We paskin that chati nezek knas is a fine, and therefore Bezin is not able to touch it.
What about
If you assume chati nezek mamon, so then presumably they'd be able to judge every single one of the cases the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, continuing on. The animal's just never going to become a muad. But each time, at least you'll be able to pay half damages. But because of the fact that we paskin chatzi nezek knasahu, that since we paskin that it's a penalty payment, so then therefore, if they're not smuchim, Bezdin's not never going to be able to judge those cases in today's day and age.
What about medical expenses? If a ox scores you, you're probably gonna have to go to get a tetanus shot at least.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that you're gonna have to there. Yeah, for sure. There's gonna be what you're gonna have to pay. Yeah, you're gonna have to go to in those scenarios. We don't say that the guy's off the hook. In those scenarios, there would be Bezdin would give a heter arkos, be able to go to the secular court to deal with it. Yeah, there's no other option. There's no other option. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what happens if you, a Jew who's involved in this disagrees or doesn't want to accept I mean, he does what he has to, he pays it,
Yeah.
but can he go to a civil court and get this again in the civil court?
No, there's a prohibition
So,
of going to a civil court,
yeah, but.
a secular court.
Yeah. the second-
Yeah, it's prohibition. Yeah.
Completely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Torah tells us that these are the statutes that you are supposed to deal with lifnehem, in front of them. The Gemara says lifnehem v'lo lifnei akum. You're supposed to go in front of the smuchim. You're supposed to go in front of a proper bezdin and not in front of a secular court.
But
Yeah.
I'm not
So it's
saying,
an
that.
Isser
I'm
Esem.
saying you do both.
No. So I'm said that the second time is that means going in front of, yeah, those are two isolated scenarios, right? Okay. So that's just for us to get a framework in terms of how exactly the whole muad, how the whole function of muad works. That the animal, it's mamish going in front of a real bezdin in order for it to take place. If there is no real bezdin, then it's not being called a muad. That's the bottom line. Yeah, that's the bottom line. Okay. Now, what I want to discuss now is the second part of the Mishnah, where Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir have two different solutions on how to get out of being a tam. How to get out of being a muad back to being a tam. Where Rabbi Yehuda said that in the same way you got into it, of these three isolated instances, you then were posed by the same challenge and you overcame the challenge and did not know that the animal's back to its normal behavior. And Rav Meir give another example that the kids are roughhousing with the animal and it doesn't do anything to the kids. Okay, that's how it's back to being a calm animal. The question is, are they in agreement or are they disagreeing? Meaning, when Rav Meir says that the kids are playing, so would he agree though that if there were three instances where the animal could have acted the same way he had previously and doesn't, then that means it doesn't become a tam?
Special case of Rabbi Yehuda.
Right? So
Special case.
right? It seems like, right? Is Rav Meir agree? Is he just giving an additional circumstance? Right? That's the discussion that we need to have now. So the Tosas Yom writes the following. He says, that when the children are mashmishin bo, that they're playing with the animal and it doesn't hurt them. Dai afilu b'pam achas. That first time that the kids are out playing with the animals and it doesn't and the aggressor doesn't do anything to them. Mistama choser li tam uso. That it now means it has gone back to its state of being a tam. Its state of being a tam. Says the Tosas Yontiv, Hachi mashma, Midolo hisker shalosh pa'amim el gabe hada. That it sounds like from here of the fact that the clause of the three times only applies when there are warnings. When there were the three warnings and then it became a tam, so then there's a way of getting out of it by also having these three isolated moments of calmness. Mikol makom, and nevertheless, Chazar Shoshosh Yamim Pshita Desagi. The Rush, he quotes from the Rush that says that definitely Rav Meir would agree that would work. That would work. That both the Rav Meir was not disagreeing with her view; he was just giving an additional way of getting out of it. That the kid goes, the children are playing with the animal, and it doesn't attack them, so then you can go. Then then we know the animal has calmed down. But that doesn't mean that the other clause, the more common one that Rabbi Yehuda brought up, wouldn't apply either. Okay, so that's what he quotes from the Rush. Take a look on the next page, on the back of the page, that I brought over here a comment from Rabbi Kiva Eger. The Rabbi Kiva Eger, if you take a look, it's in the bracketed area on the back page. So it says in like the like 5 lines down, as like in different font, Tosos Rabbi Kiva Eger. It's an acronym. Reish Ayin Kof Aleph. Tosos Rabbi Kiva Eger. You see it? You see it, Jerry? Yeah. Jack, you got it?
I think so.
Yeah. So the Tosos Rabbi Kiva Eger, these are the notes of Rabbi Kiva Eger on the Mishnayos. The Rabbi Kiva Eger writes the following. He says, Malashon Harav, that it seems like from the Bartanura that the Bartanura argues on the Tos on this premise of the Tos Yontif, where the Tos Yontif was positing that there's no machlokas over here, that everybody's in agreement. Okay, that these are just 2 ways of the animal turning back from a muad into a tam. That either with the 3 times of not being an aggressor, or by the children playing with the animal and not attacking. But he points out that the Bartanura seems to disagree, that there's actually a machlokas here. And the Bartanura writes as follows in the quotes: Ubaha halacha kirav Meir. Says the Bartanura that the halacha follows Reb Meir. Achu tinokos misachkimbo. That when the children are playing with the animal, meaning to say that according to the Bartanura, we paskin like Rav Meir against Rabbi Yehuda. That means that they're disagreeing, right? If we paskin like one of them against the other, that means they're disagreeing, which would mean that the animal cannot just simply revert back to being called a calm animal, to being a non-aggressive animal by not acting that way again. It needs to be posed with the child playing with the animal, and then the animal not aggressive, meaning that there's something that's really bothering the animal, and nevertheless it doesn't act aggressive. But if it's just the animal was back in the grazing field and it just that time happened to not attack anybody, that doesn't really mean anything, according to Rav Meir, in the way that the Bartanura understands it. So the Bartanura viewed this as a machlokas. Mevur, says Rabbi Kiva Eger, the Sfira Leid, the Chazar, the Shlosh Yamim, Lo Mahani, the Rav Meir. It would seem like from the Bartanura that the 3 days, the 3 consecutive times of the animal not acting aggressively will not revert the animal back to being a calm animal.
That's another difference. One specifies 3 days, the other 3
Right.
times. So that's also
So the Bartanura, maybe that's why the Bartanura felt that they were arguing on both fronts, because they argue on that piece, then it must be they're arguing on both pieces. It could very well be why the Bartanura says that. I like that idea, Joe. Yeah. So that's so we have over here just just an interesting methodological point on how to read a Mishnah, where you get to, when you read the Mishnah, you could read this Mishnah in one of 2 ways. Either that there's machlokas over here, that because of the fact that they're arguing on how the animal becomes a muad, does that mean they're also arguing about how the animal turns back into being a tam? So you have over here that the Tosas Yantiv says that they are not arguing, that Rameir is just giving an additional way of the animal reverting back, and according to the Bartanura, the way that Rabbi Kiva Eger is learning the Bartanura, that no, there's a machlokas over here, and we paskin like Rav Meir, that it doesn't need to be on 3 separate occasions, and that the animal will revert back by resisting the attempt to hurt the child while the child was playing with the animal in a very active way. I will point out that, remember, we just read in the Rambam that actually, never mind. I'm going to take that back. I was about to say that. Well, let's look it up. What did the Rambam say it was 3 separate days or all in one day? Or does he not make note of that? He says
3 days.
Well, the Rambam was saying that
Yid will be
he can never become a mullah.
Yeah.
So
Okay, we
when-
have to look that
so-
up. I'm curious about that. We have to look that up. We have to look up what the Rambam says. All right, good.
On page 25 of the Rambam commentary, note 4.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's still not clear.
yeah. All right, we'll have to look that up. All right, very good. Shkach, everybody. All right, next time we'll pick up with Mishnah. Hey. All right, very good.